Bishop Talbert Swan. How you doing, sir?
I'm good. How you feel?
Oh, I'm blessed. I'm blessed. I can't complain at all. Thank you for coming on the Rematch, Fly TV. And, there's so much I want to talk to you about. Let me get, you're a pastor, activist, author, speaker. You wear so many different hats. One of the things that we talked about, you was in my book. I interviewed you for my book a few years ago. Called Police Brutality and White Supremacy, the Fight Against American Traditions. It's actually right, over my shoulder, the other side, over my shoulder. And one of the things that we really delved into was I, committed an entire chapter to the history of racism, white supremacy, and evil, and the way that Christianity was used to perpetuate those things.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk to three men of faith in particular. So I spoke with you, Chris Broussard, Steph Curry, and all men of faith that I have a lot of respect for, and that all are honest and call out the hypocrisy, that is going on with people who are standing and saying that they represent Christ, although they're not practicing any of the fundamental principles of Jesus Christ. So I wanted to just start there and bring it to the present time. When we were talking in my book, we were talking about the history and of white evangelicals in particular. And it's a very ugly history. It definitely is. But right now we're experiencing another ugly chapter in history with Maga Christians.
Yeah.
And yeah, sometimes I'm looking at them and I'm like, you can't be reading from the same Bible that I'm reading from. And I really appreciate and respect the way that you continuously call it out, because I feel that other Christians have to call out when somebody is misusing the Bible or misusing the doctrine purposely for evil. So first of all, much respect to you for doing that. And what really gave you that courage, and I have to say, to do it? Because I know you get all kind of slander, all kind of backlash, all kind of hate, like people wouldn't believe. But first of all, what gave you that courage to be able to speak out the way that you do?
Well, really, it's the way that I was raised. I came up in a family where I saw people speaking truth to power, and I was always taught to be honest, to be fair, but to be candid and not to be afraid. And so when we look at what's happening in our nation, it's not just about bad officers with police brutality or a few bad apples in the political realm. It's about a culture that's protected by law, that's protected by policy, and that's protected by religion. And so we have churches that are totally engrossed in behavior that is completely antithetical to anything that resembles Christianity. And so they go to church on Sunday while ignoring black and brown bodies lying in the streets, while ignoring the mistreatment of the poor and the sick. And I think that you really can't separate the behavior of white evangelicals from their white supremacist roots. And until we dismantle those roots, we're going to keep seeing these things happen over and over again. We're going to keep seeing a bastardization of scripture and a misrepresentation of Christianity. And oftentimes what happens when I talk to black people, they say, how could you be in Christianity? And they base everything they know about it based off what they see from white evangelicals. And someone has to stand up and someone has to speak against it. And I may be in a small number of people that do it, but I'm glad to do it. And even against the odds, against the backlash that I get, against the death threats, and all of those things, I'd rather be on the right side of history than to be one of those black preachers that just kind of goes along to get along.
Talk to me a little bit about the backlash that you get and the death threats and the hate and everything like that, because you get it quite often, but I don't think people really understand the level and the depths of the death threats and the backlash that you get. So talk to a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it runs the gamut. And it ebbs and flows depending on what's out there in the public. Particularly if something that I say or do gets highlighted by right wing media. When the Blaze or Fox News or something like that, and of course, Outkick, any of those rags highlight something, then their entire constituency jumps on the attack. So they'll flood my inboxes on social media. They call my church. They'll start doxing me and looking up where I live, and then sometimes it even extends to making threats against my children and people in my family. So from everything from being threatened for bullets to be put in my head, to be hung from a tree, you name it, it happens, and it happens quite often. Matter of fact, it happens so much at one point in time. I'm not so sure if it's going to remain the same under this administration. I had an FBI agent that was assigned to me that basically, when I got these threats, I would just send them off to him. And, when I got the calls, we'd send the audio file and the information, and they determined whether it rose to the level of a threat that was prosecutable. There's about 4 people being prosecuted as we speak. I don't know.
Oh, wow.
How that's going to go with this administration, if those prosecutions are going to continue. But there have been people who have been prosecuted for their death threats against me, and it's something that continues. And then the amazing thing about it is some of the very people that are calling a black church and calling me the N-word and threatening to murder me call themselves Christian.
Yeah, yeah. It's really a evil time, but there's a history behind that, because the same way that the people who are calling you and giving death threats and calling themselves Christians, as we talked about in my book, they were. I'm paraphrasing what you're saying, but you said that something to the effect of they would lynch us on Saturday and be bright and early, ready for church on Sunday morning. And that statement really kind of stuck out, on your, kind of jump from the pages, because that's so accurate. But it's important for people to know, when you always make this clarification, that don't confuse what their misrepresentation of Christianity to be actually what Christianity is about. And it's very important to make that distinction.
Oh, absolutely. They and I often say that they call what they do Christianity, but it is nothing other than white supremacy. They worship at the altar of Trumpism, white supremacy. They defend racist policies. They defend Project 2025. They cheer for all of these mass deportations that are going on. They celebrate the attacks on DEI, the erasure of Black history, all the while claiming to be followers of a man who said, "Whatsoever you do to the least of these, you do to me." And so, how their theology allows them to support racism, oppression, and cruelty, and then claim to follow Jesus, only lets me know that they're not following the same Christ that we follow and that we preach about. They're following white supremacy in Christian disguise, and so I say white evangelicalism is nothing but white supremacy in drag.
Looking at Trump and the way that white evangelicals supported Trump, it's almost as if the same with white women. When you look at the first time, like, okay, maybe you got hoodwinked, maybe you didn't know, maybe you weren't sure, whatever. But then support him again a second time. I gotta say honestly, I shouldn't have been shocked, but I still was shocked. You know what I mean? Like one of those things I shouldn't be surprised by this, but it still is shocking to see that they really supported Trump again. And these are the white evangelicals, the Maga Christians. They claim that they represent Christ, the party of morals, all those different monikers that they have, but then they supported somebody like Trump.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Even now, with the controversy around the release of the Epstein files, here we have a man who is more than likely guilty of molesting children, and these MAGA Christians are the very ones who claim they're protecting children from drag queens. They're protecting children from the wrong history being taught. They tout themselves as the moral authority to protect the children of America, and yet they're going to stand 10 toes down with a man who may have a history of molesting children. Everything that they have ever talked about, family values, the sanctity of marriage, all of those things. When Barack Obama was in office, you had a man who was married one time to his college sweetheart, who had children by one woman, who brought them up in church, had them baptized in church. His life modeled everything that they said you ought to do. Went to school, got his education. The so-called pulling yourself up by your bootstraps theory, did everything, and then they called him the Antichrist. Well, if he did everything in alignment with what you say is moral and right and Christian and ethical, what makes him the Antichrist then? It has to be his skin color, because that's the only thing that is in opposition to what you claim to support. Then, by contrast, you look at Trump, a guy who's been married 3 times, cheated on all of his spouses, slept with porn stars and prostitutes, paid for his mistresses to have abortions, paid hush money to people he had affairs with, had 5 babies by 3 baby mamas, and everything this man has ever done has been antithetical to their so-called tenets of family values and Christian behavior. And then they turned around and said this man was God sent. Well, since his behavior was completely antithetical to anything that resembled Christianity, what made him God sent? Had to be his skin color, which was white. So you can't worship the God who gives you all of those tenets that you claim to stand by. You must worship the God that represents the difference between Barack Obama and Donald Trump, and that must be the God of white skin color.
You know, there's so many tenets of Republican, right wing, conservative, MAGA that they attach themselves to that are so far from what the Bible teaches us, what Jesus taught us, you know, like specifically. And I just want to go through a few of them so you can just list out the differences. Let's start with this immigration policy and ICE and the way that they are rounding and snatching people up, you know, violating their rights, putting them in cages. Talk about how the Bible speaks about how you're supposed to treat, you know, a foreigner in your country. Specifically.
Scripture is very specific. Be careful how you entertain strangers. You may entertain angels unaware. The Bible teaches us to treat the stranger with dignity and with respect. As a matter of fact, the man that they claim to model their lives after, Jesus Christ, at one point in time was a refugee in a different nation. um, when his family fled into Egypt. So here you have a man who lived life as a refugee and
Mm-hmm.
who taught you to treat the stranger with dignity and with respect and with honor, and yet they are acting completely opposite of what the Bible teaches. And the irony of all of that is they were strangers. They were the immigrants, the illegal immigrants.
Mm-hmm.
None of them traced their roots to this land. So, it's strange to me when they talk about taking our country back. I said, well, tell that to the Navajo and to
Mm-hmm.
the Cherokee and to
Mm-hmm.
the indigenous people of this land, because we're living on stolen land. As a matter of fact, Donald Trump, his father was the first generation of his family to be born in America. My family goes back 8 generations of being born in this nation.
Mm-hmm.
His father was the first generation. He traces his roots back to Germany. His wife wasn't born in this nation. And these are the people who stand up um, and look at those immigrants who are particularly black and brown with disdain, falsely labels them all as criminals, and enacts a policy to mass deport them, not based upon the so-called fact of criminality, because 80% of these people that they have detained and deported have no criminal record at all. So
Mm-hmm.
the only thing they've done wrong is to be black or brown in this nation. And then when you look at the real numbers, there are 800,000 undocumented white immigrants from various nations in Europe that are here. Yet we don't see Canadians being deported. We don't see Russians being deported. We don't see people from Poland and Italy or any of that being deported. Everybody is black and brown. While they strip Haitians of protected status, they
Mm-hmm.
give it to white South Africans.
Mm-hmm.
You can see the very contrast in his immigration policy, that it has nothing to do with protecting American citizens. It has to do with getting rid of black and brown people. And if I'd say that if Jesus were to come to America today, he'd be subject to be stopped by ICE and deported.
Wow. Wow. When you see the level of racism that historically white evangelicals have kind of wrapped their arms around and bringing it to the present. I mean, it's something where I don't understand how they don't see that hatred for another race of people solely on the basis of their skin,
Mhm.
and then a feeling of superiority is the exact opposite of what Christ taught us to do. And I just don't understand how that connection. Do you think that they don't know, or that they do know and they're just purposely trying to twist it to fit
Yeah.
their own personal desires?
Oh, they're aware. First of all, if you truly believe in God, and you believe that God created um, the universe,
Mm-hmm.
you believe that God created man and woman, and you believe all of the attributes of God being omnipresent, of God being omniscient, all knowing, of God being all powerful, of God being incapable to make a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
then you could never come to the conclusion. That's a fire alarm going on in here.
It is. Is that yours? That's
Yeah,
your.
in the
Okay, I was
hotel.
looking at mine.
We're gonna see if it's gonna stop.
We'll edit this part out. No worries.
Yeah.
It's going off in the room or outside the room?
Well, I guess it was in the hall or on the floor. Yeah. All right. I think it stopped. So the point I was making is if you really believe all of these things about God and that God is incapable of making mistakes, how could you possibly come to the conclusion that anything he created is inferior? That anything he created was a mistake? How could you come to the conclusion that a white person could be superior to a black person other than bastardizing who God is? So basically, what they have made God into is a white supremacist, because the only God who would make white people superior over everybody else can't be an infallible God. He can't be a God that doesn't make mistakes. He has to be a God that holds the same racist tendencies as they do. And so what they've done is flip the script. Instead of thinking that they have been made in God's image, they have recreated and made God in their image. That's the reason why they turned Jesus from a black man into a white man in the first place. They've made him into their image. So they're fully aware that their theology is flawed, but they try to go through scripture and justify what they say and what they believe. That's where we got the whole curse of Ham myth that, Noah cursed Canaan, and Canaan was the father of Ham. And so Hamitic people, black people, are cursed, and they're supposed to live a life of servitude and oppression. That's what John MacArthur believed. That's what he preached. That this is the guy that black preachers are going around here praising in his death. A guy who believed that they were inferior and that they should live a life of servitude. So white Christians, white evangelicals have always been able to take scripture and twist scripture into their twisted mindset and use it to justify their racism.
And talking about twisting scripture is interesting because I saw Tucker Carlson of all people and Candace Owens of all people talking about the way that white evangelicals have been twisting scripture to justify their support of the state of Israel. And it's, I'm so leery. I don't even want to repost anything that Candace Owens says, even though I'm agreeing with what she's saying on this one topic. But as soon as this topic is over, it's right back to the same Candace Owens that we know. But talk about that twisting of scripture, and so many Christians that I have heard. And this goes, black and white. This is, historically for a while that I've heard that they feel that the Jews and the Israel that the Bible speaks of are the same as the people who are occupying Israel right now, and that couldn't be furthest from the truth. But talk to me about that purposely done twisting and misinformation.
Yeah, first, where it comes to Tucker and Candace, I almost felt dirty agreeing with Tucker Carlson. um, but I actually thoroughly enjoyed the interview he did with Ted Cruz, because he basically destroyed him on the topic of Israel. But I always say, when it comes to Tucker and Candace, that a broke clock is still right twice a day. So they're on point on this particular subject matter. Yeah, and black people are still, to a large extent, operating from a colonial mindset when it comes to Christianity, or the brand of Christianity that they practice. It's a whitenized Christianity. Many black people helped to make John MacArthur rich by buying his books, and that's why when you go into some churches, you hear them sounding more like MacArthur than they do like Martin or Malcolm. And they buy into that theology. So they've been taught that, he who blesses Israel will be blessed. And they believe that we should unequivocally support Israel. And it is a biblical mandate, and our responsibility to do so. And once again, that's another bastardization of Scripture, because first of all, the biblical Israel, the black people who lived in Northeast Africa, and that's what it was. People, try to use geography as a trick to get you to think that people in that region weren't black. So they said, no, they were Middle Eastern. First of all, there was no such term as Middle East until the 1850s. Until after they built the Suez Canal, which separated Northeast Africa from what we now consider the Middle East. That was all a part of Africa. And so they want you to think that the only thing that was black in Africa was beneath the Sahara Desert. So that's why they throw around the term sub-Saharan. Oh, well, Egyptians were African, but they weren't sub-Saharan African. And that's their code word for saying they weren't black, because black couldn't have made the pyramids. They couldn't have done, the things that the Egyptians did. So they want you to think that the European Jews, many who were converts, there was some who may have been indigenous to the land, but many were converts. And once again, we got to remember that the Jewish people were scattered literally all over the globe. And in the wake of Hitler's Holocaust, and after that was over, when the superpowers of the day, the Britons, France, America, got together and decided to help create the nation state of Israel. They went into that land and pushed Palestinians off of the land that they had lived on for literally over 2 centuries. And they resettled that land with European Jews. And so now they want to pretend that those European Jews trace their roots back to biblical times, to the Jews of that land. And there's nothing that is further from the truth. As a matter of fact, the nature tells you that the highest number of cases of skin cancer in the world are in Israel. And that has to do with Europeans being in climates that they're not indigenous to, that they were not meant to be in.
Right.
And so the political Israel that exists today is not the biblical Israel. And we are under no mandate or no obligation to unequivocally support anything that it does. And at the end of the day, whenever people do something that is in opposition to what should be our Christian faith and practice, we have a responsibility to oppose that.
Yes.
So murdering babies and killing civilians and committing genocide and all of the atrocities that the Israeli government is guilty of, you can't call yourself a Christian and unequivocally support that and not question that at all. And then America is complicit in that it continues to fund it. It continues to send billions of dollars every year to fund genocide, sends weapons to fund genocide. One of the most hypocritical things in recent days is Israel bombing a church in Gaza. And at the same time, this happened right on the heels of Benjamin Netanyahu nominating Donald Trump for a Nobel Peace Prize. So here you have a war criminal who has decades of the blood of Palestinian bodies on his hands. First of all, someone like that should not even be allowed to nominate anyone for a Nobel Prize.
Agreed.
Then he nominates Donald Trump, of all people in the world, a man whose life is all about sowing discord and violence for a Nobel Prize. And then within days after that, the nominator, his government bombs a church in Gaza and kills innocent civilians. It's just mind-boggling. So we have no. I agree with Candace and Tucker on this one thing. I don't know if I'll agree with them on another.
Right. I just want to keep it going with the list of things that are really against the teachings of Jesus. The way that MAGA Republicans, how they view people less fortunate, how they view the poor, how they want to take away more benefits. They want to take away more, rights. They want to take away, whether it's defunding their education, taking away Medicaid, taking away all the governmental programs that, were once in place and, supported by the Biden administration. But how does that directly stand in the face of the teachings of Jesus Christ?
So Jesus, when Jesus goes to be baptized by John in Jordan, and then he leaves there and he goes into the wilderness, is tempted by Satan. And when he comes out of the wilderness, he goes into the temple and he takes his text as a rabbi for the first time. And he speaks from the book of the prophet Isaiah.
Mm-hmm.
Says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, for he has anointed me to preach good tidings to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to set at liberty those that are captive, to open up the eyes of the blind, and to preach the acceptable year of our Lord. So Jesus literally says, and when he closes the book, this day this is fulfilled in your hearing. So he says, I came so that I could give hope to the poor, so that I could heal those that are sick,
Mm-hmm.
so that I could free those that are oppressed. So he starts his ministry out. The first sermon he ever preaches lets you know who he was called to,
Mm-hmm.
the less fortunate. And throughout his entire 3.5-year public ministry, those are the people that he ministered to and on behalf of. He says in one particular lesson, when I was hungry, you didn't feed me. When I was in prison, you didn't visit me. When I was sick, you didn't minister to me. When did we do this, Jesus? Inasmuch as you have done it to the least of these, my little ones, you have done it unto me. So he is very specific
Mm-hmm.
how we are to treat those that are less fortunate, those that live on the margins, those who are the most vulnerable among us. You cannot be a Christian. You cannot call yourself a Christian if you support policies and actions that go against those populations that Jesus said he was called for. You cannot be a Christian and say it's okay to strip health care from millions of people who need health care, from the sick. You cannot be a good Christian and say it's okay to get rid of programs that support poor children
Mm-hmm.
and the elderly and the less fortunate. And so we've got to reclaim a faith that stands with the oppressed. That means speaking truth to power in our pulpits. That means organizing, um, in our communities. That means voting with justice in mind and refusing to let people use Jesus to justify their
Mm-hmm.
justice. Nothing in the big so-called beautiful bill, nothing in trying to get rid of Obamacare or to defund it, nothing in their policies around immigrants is in alignment with Christianity. As you said at the beginning of this, we can't be reading from the same Bible.
Right, right. And it's so interesting that you have so many people who are less fortunate. I'm from Tulsa, Oklahoma. That's where I grew up. And I remember the big MAGA conventions and, Trump coming to speak. I mean, you remember when in the middle of COVID, the first place they went was in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right at the BOK Center. People that are from Tulsa are saying there's no BOK Center, big stadium, defying the rules of distancing and wearing a mask and everything like that. And people were passing away, and all these different things. And you have all of these people that are below the poverty line, that are literally living in trailer homes.
Yes.
Like literally, like when I say it's the poverty line, and then there's the line below the poverty line where they are. And they are staunch Trump supporters, have the full get up, the MAGA hat, the MAGA shirt, the flag, the everything, bringing the little kids there, kissing baby to try to, and I'm just amazed at how he got those people to vote against their specific interests.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the most poignant photos I remember is when in the 2020 election, someone photographed a trailer park full of Trump signs. And I thought to myself, how in the world could these people really think that the policies that he supports or projects are in their best interest?
Right.
And of course they didn't, because what it is Trump tapped into their racism. He resonated with them because of his rhetoric around dehumanizing people who don't look like them.
Right.
He specialized in being able to blame their plight in life on people who were different than they are. The reason you're in your condition is these immigrants are taking your job, and these Black people are getting this government money for welfare, and these people over here are getting these benefits. And so though his policies did nothing to help them or support them, he gave them talking points that they could support. Yes, we agree that these people should not. And so they will vote against their own best interests as long as what they're voting for hurts you. That's part of the narrative we see all over social media now, where people who are now being affected by Project 2025 and Trump's policies are saying, we didn't vote for this.
Right.
You did, though.
Yeah.
You just voted for it to happen to somebody else. And you were okay with it as long as it was happening to somebody else. It wasn't until you lost your job or some benefit or something happened to you, or to my Latino brothers and sisters, until somebody in your family got arrested by ICE.
Right.
You were okay with this happening to other people. But now that it's happening to you, you say you didn't vote for it. Well, actually, you did. And here's the thing that Trump has been able to use to keep these people unequivocally on his side is because there's certain truths out there. First of all, white supremacy has always loved to wear a cross. That's nothing new. And people have to understand that Jesus was not crucified for maintaining the status quo. He was crucified for upsetting the status quo. The whole Make America Great Again is about maintaining the status quo. Let's keep those people in their place, and let's keep our people where they belong. And that's what drives these people to vote against their best interests. Because at the end of the day, I may be poor, I may live in a trailer, I may not have health insurance, I may not have the money, but I'm not Black.
No, I'm not Black. Goodness gracious, and what do you tell, young people who are so disheartened by the political process that they really have kind of elected to not even be involved? Like during the elections, I saw a lot on social media of people saying, they're the same. They're, two feathers of the same bird. There's no difference. And I'm like, well, there's a difference. You know what I mean? Biden was a lot of things. I had a lot of criticisms for Biden, a lot of things that I disagreed with. I mean, honestly, even going back to the primaries for him, he wasn't even in my top 10 as a choice, but looking at the alternative, the alternative could get much worse,
Yeah. So my thing has always been the duopoly, the two-tiered political system in America doesn't serve the best interest of the American people in general,
Right.
but for Black people and non-white people in particular. That's a fact. And we have not been able to figure out how we break through it or how we change it.
Right.
And so there are things about both parties
Of course.
that I think aren't in the best interest of Black people. And I've had my share of criticism for both Republicans and for Democrats. And I've talked about Democrats giving us a whole lot of show, but not a lot of substance. About them being apathetic to the needs and the concerns of its Black constituents because it understands that we are going to keep voting because the alternative is so much worse. And so when you feel like you've capitalized on someone's votes, you're going to do less to satisfy those people because you begin to take them for granted. Be that as it may, it's not the same as you stated, because there's one party that is going to be apathetic to your concerns, that you're going to have to keep holding accountable and pushing to do what's in your best interest. But then there's another party that doesn't even want you on the planet,
right?
that wants to deport you and get you out of America altogether. That doesn't care if you get murdered on the streets. And the difference between Trump and whoever he was running against,
right,
is they may not have been the best for us, but Trump always posed an existential threat to our very humanity, our dignity, and our existence. And he came in with a plan basically to erase us. And you know, I always tell people we only a couple of laws removed from the plantation. And these folk are trying to get rid of those, and to put us in a position where we have no rights, where they erased what our forefathers have fought for so many years. And so I say to young people, I understand your frustration. I understand your apathy to a certain extent. I even understand your frustration with those in the Black community, with some of our civil rights organizations and our churches, who many of them have become part of the system. I understand all of that, but in order to change that, you got to get involved. And it's always been the young people that have been at the forefront of making systemic change for our people. People have to understand, when Martin Luther King Jr. first got involved in the Montgomery bus boycott, he was 26 years old. He died before he was 40.
Yeah.
Malcolm died before he was 40 years old. These weren't old people that were out here changing the world. These were always young people who were at the forefront of these movements. And so people like me, who's 60 years old, and others, we shouldn't be the major voices of change in this nation. We need the youth, the vim, the vitality, the energy, the ingenuity, the creativity of the younger generation to stand in the gap and to lead us to where we need to go.
I definitely agree. What do you say to? I don't know how big of a number it is. It was definitely a bigger number that I would have liked to have seen. But the rise, I don't want to overstate it, because it's still not a a majority or an alarming number that way. But it seems to be more Black men, who are Trump supporters, and you see them online. I repost your stuff a lot of times, and it's my stuff as well. And I see them online, and I'm just trying to understand, like, where are you coming from? Like, how are you supporting this? And they have a lot of venom towards the Democrat Party. They have a lot of venom towards Kamala Harris and Biden and Obama, and but they don't have the same energy with Trump.
Yeah.
And I used to think that there was, like they had some of the people for a little while that they were white Trump supporters posing as black people online.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not all of those cases.
Right.
Some of these is actually black men, who believe this and are spouting this. What do you make? What do you make of that?
Yeah, it's one. It's people who have become disenfranchised from the Democrat Party, and rightfully so, as some of the things that I stated before in terms of their apathy toward our community, taking us for granted, not making good on promises that they've made. I think there's a real disdain for the fact that the Democrats will go all out and specifically name policies and initiatives for various other groups. They'll talk by name about the LGBTQ community. They'll talk by name about Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. They'll talk by name about Native Americans. They'll talk by name about transgendered people, but then they won't talk specifics when it comes to Black people. And they say it's because we can't get the legislation passed, or there'll be opposition if we specifically say Black people. One of the most viral clips about Kamala Harris was the one where she says, "I'm not going to do something specifically for Black people." And there have been those who have been able to, take that and use that to resonate with Black men around being opposed to Democrats. And so I fully understood those who felt like I don't want to vote Democrat, or maybe I'll vote third party or something. I've not made the connection of how they get to being a Trump supporter, because in my mind, if you're pro-Black, I can understand your opposition to Democrats. I don't get your support of Trump, and you call yourself being pro-Black, and so I think a lot of those are contrarians. Is the people who think that we're going to teach the Democrats a lesson, by supporting the other party. Those who just feel like we need some other alternative, but I'm just as baffled as you are when it comes to folk who claim that they want what's in the best interest of Black people, to vote for Trump and Project 2025 and everything that it represents. These are, but the other thing is, I think that Republicans have been far better in their messaging. They've been far better in that group that was on the fence, that group that was on the bubble. They were better in their messaging and being able to appeal to them and draw them over. And were our people a little shallow and all of that, and being enamored with gold sneakers and pardons of rappers and all of that? Absolutely. I do believe they were very shallow if that's all it took to make you a Trump supporter, there's something wrong with you. But it worked, because when he got elected in 2016, he had 13% in that category. Last time he had nearly 20%. So something worked in raising those numbers. But I'm just as confused at how 20% of Black men could support an open, virulent, unrepentant racist like Donald Trump.
I want to ask you. I'm not going to keep you too long. I could talk to you for hours. But I want to ask you your position on this created division. You hear the term tethers, or you hear the term FBA, or those, and it for me, and I had to make an announcement on my page about a week or two ago, that that I know that the actual book, the actual story of Willie Lynch, been proven to be fabricated, but the messaging and the tactic behind Willie Lynch's theory of causing division
Yeah,
amongst the slaves and the tactics that he would use is very much real.
yeah,
And that was a tactic that was utilized across plantations for a very long time, and we're still seeing remnants of that now. Whether it's the different texture of hair, the different color of skin, the nose, the lips, call anything to cause division, and usually it is colorism where your features are more like white folks is looked upon as being better or superior, and the other way of more African features are looked down upon. Now, I equate that to what I'm seeing with this rift between fundamental Black Americans and people from the Caribbean. Now, my family is from Grenada, and I have very strong, proud Grenadian roots.
mhm,
Malcolm X's grandmother was from Grenada. Um, but I keep seeing this push of a differentiation between, oh, well, they're different because they're have Caribbean roots. So then they're not the same. And I'm like, well, we're fighting the same enemy. Like I don't know why we're creating another division amongst ourselves. And when there's so many divisions being implemented and amongst our people from the time of slavery. So I just want to see where you stand on that whole, FBA, because I see it creep up more and more in a bigger push. And you
yeah,
see things, for instance, when you mentioned about the Haitians and they were, stripped of their citizenship. And I just saw a lot of people like, well, that's not our problem. I'm like, wait a minute. Haitians are, you feel separate from Haitians because, about and I keep seeing things like that online. And again, I don't want to overstate the numbers,
right,
but it is bothersome to see.
yeah. So let me say this um, to kind of make the foundation for this. I believe that the struggle of Black people, the oppression that we have historically faced and continue to face, um, the dehumanization, um, and the struggle of our people is global, has always been global because anti-Blackness is global. No
Right.
matter where you go, um, as a Black person in the world, we face similar challenges.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there are unique historical things that Black people have faced in different parts of the globe. Um, I think the point of those who are what they call foundational Black Americans are a unique experience that those who descended from enslaved Africans in America have had to face over the last 400 or so years through enslavement, brutalization, dehumanization, mass incarceration, segregation, redlining, etc. Um, it is arguable that the most brutal form of slavery throughout the historical annals was American chattel slavery. And so when they begin to make the argument about reparations and those things, they're specifically talking about those who descended from those that were enslaved in America. And I happen to agree that they have a unique claim for reparations. I'm what they would call a foundational Black American, but I'm also one who understands the struggle of Black people everywhere. That we weren't the only ones enslaved; they were enslaved in different parts of the world as well. I think the conflict comes in um, when you have people from other parts of the diaspora, whether
Mm-hmm.
it be from one of the 54 nations on the African continent, or whether it be from those who come from the Caribbean, or from South America or wherever they come from, when they come to America, and then there's a narrative of an attempt to separate themselves from Black Americans, or to even to a certain extent um, speak negatively about Black Americans, or to deny their Blackness based upon wanting to disassociate from Black Americans. Because there are those who are from Africa that will say, I'm not Black. Or I've even heard my brothers and sisters from Grenada or Jamaica or Trinidad or Tobago say, I'm not Black. Because they define being Black with being Black American. And so then there's been the argument about various levels of accomplishment by Black Americans, who deserves credit for it, who deserves credit for hip hop, who deserves credit for this genre of music, or who deserves credit for that, and the argument of whether it was foundational Black Americans or were people in the Caribbean involved, and so on and so forth. So there's arguments around that, and so I think that it is a divisive a methodology that ultimately waters down the strength of our struggle, because I think we're always better together. And we've got to take a good hard look at who our common enemy is, and how that if we are fighting together, that we have a better chance of reaching our end goals. And so, yeah, I've seen that happening. I'm not in agreement with that level of conflict or separation. But I do agree that there are unique claims that foundational Black Americans have. And you know, I had a debate recently with a someone who was in my denomination, who is of Nigerian descent, who disagrees that we should get reparations, who basically disagrees with just about anything that's in the best interest of Black people. He is the type of person that they would call a tether. You know, basically that someone who is not a foundational Black American, but who speaks against those things that are in the best interest of Black Americans. It's a real dicey situation, and it definitely had an effect, I believe, on the election, on what happened, you know, during the electoral process, because I think there's also a perception that Democrats cater to communities that aren't foundational Black Americans, that they cater to the immigrant population, and to DACA, and when their focus should be on Black Americans. And I think we really need to have some candid conversations around this, because the old adage of divide and conquer, it works best when we're doing it to ourselves. And I think that's what's happening right now.
Yeah, no, definitely, and it's such a frustrating thing to see. I mean, you know, in the history throughout the Caribbean, you know, there was slavery.
Absolutely.
You know, and having the debate on whose slavery was worse, just is like, you know, two slaves having a debate on whose chains are heavier. You know what I mean? I mean,
and then when you look at when ICE attempted recently to go into a Haitian community, and you looked at the pushback, you know, I said that's the spirit of their ancestors, because when Europeans tell us, well, we were the first ones to abolish slavery, I said, now you better go to 1804 and you better study the Haitian Revolution and understand where the pushback against slavery came from. So, you know, you're absolutely correct. You know, they experienced it in different parts, and I don't even think that's the argument that that it was not experienced by them. I think the argument comes into play when you have someone of African descent, of Haitian descent, or some other descent who says either there shouldn't be reparations to Black Americans, or if there is reparations, we should be part of it. I think that's what creates the argument that foundational Black Americans feel this is our unique claim, and no one else should be trying to ride the bandwagon, or no one else should be trying to discourage or be in opposition of it.
And that's the part I struggle with that one, because it's not, first of all, neither one of us are having reparations, so we're kind of speaking on something that is not even in existence. But
right.
but it's.
So I think their argument is that if you are of Haitian descent, then you should seek reparations from the Haitian government, or from the government that colonized you.
Right, but what if you? But the way that we are mixed, like my grandmother was from Grenada, my grandfather is from South Carolina, so there's a mixture of both.
Then you would in their mind you would qualify for reparations from America because you descended from a foundational Black American.
But that's the thing, the cutoff and the rules, it just seems like it's not something that we should be quarreling about at all whatsoever.
But there really aren't any rules because there's no reparations on the table right now.
Right. That is true. That is true. Now let me ask you one more question and I'll let you go. I've been talking to you for an hour. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours. But what role can the church have in the struggle for Black people? In the 60s, the church was such a key factor and a key role in, the resistance and pushing for laws to be changed and, figuring out whether it was the Montgomery boycott or, sitting, everything was, kind of centered in the church. And that has kind of shifted now. Is it possible for the church to recapture that role in the advancement of Black people?
It has to. The Black church in particular should be Elijah and not Ahab's cheerleader. What I mean by that is we saw a bunch of Black preachers down at the White House praying with Paula White, and another group of Black preachers praying for Donald Trump and Elon Musk. So they're down there cheering Ahab, cheering the oppressor. Instead of being Elijah, the prophet that speaks truth to power and challenges what they do. I think to a large extent, I did a spoken word piece about the church needing to get its voice back because it has laryngitis. Something happened. There was a shift that took place where the Black church stopped speaking truth to power and promulgating those issues that were in the best interest of Black people. And they started with the prosperity gospel and really a very self-centered type of gospel,
right?
That centered on yourself and the population that we serve, and started ignoring the political realities that existed in America. And so a place that used to be the center for Black life, because that's what the Black church was. When Black folk couldn't be anything but subservient to white people, they got their dignity and respect from the church. I mean, where else could you go and be the janitor in your secular life, but be the head of the trustee board or the head deacon or whatever? But the church restored a sense of pride and dignity and self-worth to Black men and to Black women, and it taught Black children, and it helped Black mothers send their children to school, and it provided training, and it was the hub for where monies were raised to start schools and hospitals and those types of things. The Black church had always been the most independent entity in the Black community, which is why the Black preacher was at the forefront of the civil rights movement, because he was the most independent voice in the Black community, because he did not have to depend on white folks for his sustenance. He didn't have to sing for his supper. He got his support and resources from the Black community so he could speak with a clear voice on behalf of Black people. We've compromised that now. Compromised that both in the church and within Black civil rights organizations and the such. With everything that was going on in Gaza, we have to ask the question, where was the voice of Black civil rights organizations?
It's true.
Well, you've got to follow the dollar. And if you can trace the dollar to those entities that are supportive of Israel and what it's doing, you can understand the silence of those civil rights organizations. You can understand the silence of those churches. And so we've got to regain our voice. But the only way we do that is from the pews to the pulpit, and not the pulpit to the pews. Because those who sit in the pews have to hold those in the pulpits accountable. And until the people who support the churches start demanding that their leadership speaks in the best interest of Black people, organizes in the best interest of Black people, pushes policies that are in the best interest of Black people, and resists the government that is not in the best interest of Black people, then we're going to have the status quo. And so they got to start voting from the pews with either their feet or their money, because that will get the attention of Black folk. When Black leaders start seeing empty pews, and when they start seeing empty offering baskets, then they'll change their tune.
I definitely agree. I got to give you your props on the way that you use your voice, the way that you use your platform. I remember back a couple of years ago, you were the only Black pastor that I saw speak out in defense of Kyrie Irving when the entire country, including Black media, were coming down on him.
Yeah.
And I was searching. I was like, okay, somebody gonna say something. I'm looking around, nobody but you spoke out. And you said, wait a minute, no, this isn't right. No, what are you gonna, make him have to grovel, and he's gonna then be put forth the 8-step plan that he had to do, and he had to donate to the ADL, then he had to go meet with the rabbi here, then he had to go through all for him tweeting out a link. But the silence though is the part that bothers me, and the silence of not just the white evangelicals, not just the Maga Christians, but the silence of the Black church, of Black pastors on things that are directly affecting Black people. That is one of the things that are causing a lot of the younger generation to kind of lose, hope and interest and connection to the Black church, because I don't know how many times I get on social media, and people will say, I haven't really met too many Christians like you. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? They're like, well, you speak out against injustice, and you speak out against this, and you call out this, but then you're also Christian. But it shouldn't be like that.
Right.
You know what I mean? That should
be the rule and not the exception.
Exactly. And how do we get that to where, where it's not just, Bishop Talbert Swan, and I can't name another person who is speaking out on different issues the way that you do. Like, what is it going to take to get, the majority of Black men of cloth, to be able to have the same passion that you have?
I think we've got to hold each other accountable. Black preachers and pastors in leadership have to hold their colleagues accountable and say, hey, man, I notice you're not speaking on this, or I notice you are speaking in support of that. We've got to challenge them on that. There were those who came out supporting the big, beautiful bill. And we've got to speak. We've got to question that. And I know people say, well, no, you need to talk to him behind closed doors. Someone challenged me because I had said something about Marvin Winans and his position on fraternities and sororities. Oh, you should have You should have talked to him privately. I said, well, no, when you say something publicly, when you send literally thousands of people to hell because they disagree with you on something, and you do it publicly, then you need to be challenged publicly on it. And so we've got to call each other out, and we've got to hold each other accountable. And then once again, those who sit in the pews, those who support, they have to do it as well. We've got to demand more from the people that we support and that we give our resources to. One of the things I started doing as a policy when I was younger, I would try to save the world, no matter who it was, what they were going through. And I would often have people who would want to have a meeting with me to talk about what happened to their son or what happened, on their job and how I can help them. Could I go to court with them? And could I do this? And I started noticing, okay, this person is a member of this church. That person is a member of that church. So I started asking them, what church do you belong to? Well, I belong to ABC Church. Have you met with your pastor about this? Well, no, he doesn't do things like that. I said, okay, then you need to reassess why you're going to his church. And I decided that I was not going to let people pay their tithes to the church down the street. Them and their family support the church down the street. But then when they get in trouble, they want to come to me and expect me and my church to fight their battles. And so I'm like, no, either hold your pastors accountable to be able to assist you. But if you're going to call on us, then you need to come and support the work that we're doing. Because I'm not going to kill myself off of trying to save the world while you're tithing over there and not getting the services that you need from there. So people have to start calling their own leadership into account. And it's not about, oh, well, my pastor's not a civil rights activist. That doesn't mean they can't speak truth to power. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be speaking on your behalf if you're being mistreated, if they're your spiritual leader. And so we've got to have pastors that are bold enough. But I think a lot of them don't want to be labeled. They don't want the smoke that may come with it. And they've done a good job at making examples out of people. The example you used about Kyrie Irving. We're going to make an example out of Kyrie, so nobody else dares to do what he did. And we've seen it happen when Mark Lamont Hill got fired from CNN for speaking on behalf of the Palestinian people. When they made and I'm having a senior moment right there, but Wilding Out, the actor,
Nick Cannon,
when they made Nick Cannon jump through hoops because of the show he had with Professor Griff and what he said, and so they pick on Black people and they make examples out of them so that if you do this, we're going to take your contracts. We're going to make sure that we're going to make your life a living hell so that the person looking at this, they won't do that. And they've tried that with me. I didn't get reappointed to a commission in my state, the Commission on the Status of African Americans, because the Jewish president of the Massachusetts Senate didn't like my position on Gaza and the genocide there.
Wow.
So it happens where they try to snatch your resources, snatch your contracts, snatch your influence, snatch you off of any boards or anything, so that they can make sure that other people get the message that this is where you stay away from.
Right. Wow.
And it's been effective.
Right. Well, I have to say much respect to you for continuing the fight, to continuing to using your voice. No matter the death threats, no matter the hate, no matter the threats of not putting you on the different boards or not giving you support that you should be having, you really continue. So can you tell everybody where they can find you, where they can follow you, where they can really be familiar with all of your work?
Yeah, you can connect with me on all social platforms. I'm at Talbert Swan, TalbertSwan. Love to connect with you. Hit me up. Check me out on Medium. I've been doing a lot of writing lately, just as a cathartic way of releasing some of the thoughts in these dangerous times that we live in. Appreciate your support.
Sounds great. Sounds great. Bishop, I appreciate you coming on the show. Keep doing your thing. Sorry I held you too long. Like I said, I just keep asking you questions, but I really appreciate it. So thanks for coming on the show and keep doing what you're doing.
All right, man. Appreciate you.
All right. Bless.
Drop me the link when it hits.
Oh, definitely. Definitely will.
All right.